International Sabbath. It's good to see different cultures all over the world, and it reminds me that the Most High God is still with us everywhere. So, children, this story today is titled The Three Trees. Okay? Once upon a mountaintop, three little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grow up. The first little tree looked up at the stars and said, I want to hold treasure. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I'll be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world. Then the second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling by on its way to the ocean. It said, I want to be traveling mighty waters and carrying powerful kings. I'll be the strongest ship in the world. Then the third little tree looked down into the valley below, where busy men and women worked in a busy town. I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all. All I want to do is grow so tall that when people stop and look at me, they'll raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world. Years passed, the rain came, the sun shined, and the little trees grew tall and strong. One day, 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, This tree is beautiful. It's perfect. And with a swoop of his axe, the first tree fell. Now, said the little tree, I shall be made into a gorgeous chest. I shall hold wonderful treasure. And the second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, This tree is strong. It's perfect for me. So with a swoop of his axe, the second tree fell. Now, I shall sail mighty waters, thought the second tree. I shall be a strong ship for mighty kings. Now the third tree felt her heart sink when the last woodcutter looked her way. She stood straight and tall and pointed bravely towards the heavens. But the woodcutter never even looked up. Any kind of tree will do for me, he muttered. So with a swoop of his axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought her to a carpenter shop. But the carpenters fashioned the tree into a feed box for animals. So the once beautiful tree was not covered with gold, nor with treasure. She was coated with sawdust and filled for hay for hungry animals. The second tree smiled. When the woodcutter took her to a shipyard, she thought, I'm going to be a mighty, strong sailing ship. But instead, she was made into a small little boat. The once strong tree was hammered and sawed into that small fishing boat. She was too small and too weak to sail on any ocean or any river. Instead, she was taken to a little lake. The third tree was so confused when the woodcutter cut into strong beams and left her in a lumber yard. What happened, the once tall tree said. All I ever wanted was to stay on the mountaintop and point to God. Many, many days and nights passed. The 3 trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, a golden starlight poured over the first tree. As a young woman placed her newborn baby in the feed box. I wish I could make a cradle for him, her husband whispered. So the mother squeezed his hands and smiled as the starlight shined on the smooth and sturdy wood. This manger is beautiful, she said. And suddenly the first tree knew He was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into an old fishing boat. An old fishing boat. But the tired traveler fell asleep. So the second tree quietly sailed out onto the lake. Stretched out his hands and said, "Peace." Then the storm stopped as quickly as it began. And suddenly the second tree knew she was carrying the King of heaven in her. So one Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered and flinched as she was carrying through an angry, jeering crowd. So she shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly, harsh, and cruel. But on that following morning, it was Sunday. The sun rose and the earth trembled beneath her, joy beneath her. And when she felt that, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the third tree stand so strong, and every time people thought of that third tree, they would think of God. That was better than being the tallest tree in the world. So those three trees may have not gotten what they wanted or dreamed of or even what they prayed for. But that doesn't mean they are worthless. God used them to be the king's bed. He used them to be the king's boat. And lastly, God used them to be the cross, where all the people around the world would see that that cross is the cross that the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, died for our faults, our transgressions, our mistakes, and our sins. Thank you, kids.